From vulnerability to vigilance. We all have taken cybersecurity awareness training, and sometimes cybersecurity awareness training can feel like fish sticks, where it's just a necessary fix to try to solve the problem. I know a lot of parents can relate to that. We all give our kids fish sticks. We've all been fed fish sticks, and that's kind of like what cybersecurity awareness training has felt like. It feels like fish sticks because it solves a problem temporarily, but it leaves us wanting a real solution. I have a guest today who's bringing in a little bit of perspective on psychology to approach this problem because this problem hasn't gone away. It's actually increased in difficulty, it's increased in the opportunity as well. We're going to be talking about some of the surveys that they've done and also why motivation, not knowledge, is the missing link for all of this. Without further ado, run the intro.
Who says tech can't be human?
Welcome back to the show. My special guest for this episode is a award-winning entrepreneur, someone that's recognized as a global cybersecurity expert. They speak at regular conferences, public and private, and they're doing something special in the world of security awareness and up-leveling people in general so we don't find ourselves victim to cybersecurity incidents. I think they're doing something very special. So I would love to introduce my special guest and also sponsor for this episode. We have David Shipley, who is the CEO and Field CISO at Beauceron Security. David, I've been looking so forward to this episode. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. So I've had the special opportunity to speak to you probably like 4 or 5 times now. And every time we speak, I always say, oh man, you have some of the most quotable words ever. Like you were dropping knowledge and information on us. And I was like, I could quote that. I could quote that. So I would love for you to just kind of take a second to tell us a little bit about what you're doing today, kind of how you got into the seat of CEO at Beauceron and how your your background came from a reporting background as well.
Yeah, so I often joke I'm the accidental cybersecurity founder. So I've been a Canadian Forces soldier. I was a newspaper reporter. I covered everything from provincial and federal politics here in Canada to crime, murders, you name it. Got out of journalism in 2008. Was very happily recruited into the University of New Brunswick's marketing team. Got this gargantuan project to take a 200,000 page website and make it functional at 20,000 pages, and we did a phenomenal job. I worked very closely with the IT team. And then on Mother's Day 2012, my life changed completely. Early that morning, I was out that Sunday morning walking my dog, and I was checking my email as one does when one is as big a nerd as I am. And I got this nasty note from this hacktivist group called Team Digital. And they said, we've compromised your site. We've published non-public information. And hilariously, they ended their nasty note with hugs and kisses, Team Digital, which I thought, well, that's different. Rushed back into the house, looked at Pastebin. Yeah, it looked like they were telling the truth. Contacted my friends in the IT department and said, "How can I help?" And I rolled up my sleeves and I used my background from journalism and the military to do what I would now call incident response. And afterwards, the CIO asked me to help build the first elements of a security strategy and team, and sort of the first bits of a CISO role there. And as I was going through that experience, we had access to some pretty amazing technology, including QRadar, which was the first of the really cool
Mhm.
SIMs back in the day. And that actually got spun out from the IT team at our university, and it got acquired for 600 million. And we were playing around trying to build this technological solution to cyber risk. And we had a lot. We had 1,500 malware infections. We had people falling victim to phishing. We had hundreds of millions of different sort of folks poking at trying to abuse our infrastructure. And what I realized is that cyber was always about people, process, culture, and technology. It was never technology alone. And I think the superpower that I bring to the field isn't that I'm the most technical cybersecurity leader out there. I'm not. I mean, I can be dangerous and terrify my CTO with my bare bones Python skills. but I bring the liberal arts perspective and thinking about people, process, culture into the cyber problem. And one of the things I always like to end off when I talk about the story is probably the most important thing I discovered is that cyber as a word has an important meaning and context. It's often become a throwaway, but actually, if you dig into
Yeah.
the history and meaning behind the word, it means people, technology, and control. And I believe
Cyber?
we have a future. Yes. So
Hmm.
cyber is people, technology, and control. And we have a positive future when people are in control of technology. But when we use technology to control people, either you end up with Skynet and the Terminator or Boeing MAX 8 disaster or Tesla autopilot. So I don't believe in technology controlling humans.
When you were talking about psychology kind of being the force multiplier, the reason why we need to do a reboot to security education, I thought that was fascinating. Where did that stem from, and like what was that aha moment?
So one of the things interesting about the work that we started in 2017 when we started the company is that we started working this idea of a personal cyber risk score. And at the time, we were trying to develop a score that was the perfect, accurate indicator of how risky each employee would be. Now, what we've learned since then, over 7 years, is that the score was less able to be perfectly accurate to the risk of an individual. But wow, when people could see a score that they were being measured at and could influence with their knowledge attainment, with their actual behaviors, when they could not just lose at the game of phishing simulations, but win at it, it was an incredible motivator. We saw people doing things that were amazing, sometimes even more than we ever expected. Like some folks were taking more training than they needed to take because of this. And we realized something important in the last couple of years that the challenge in security awareness isn't just knowledge dissemination. That might have been the problem from 1990 to 2010. The challenge today, and even more so in the future, is how do we align with motivation? And we talk about this in our company as the fundamental problem we solve is that we help motivate people to make good choices about technology so that they can reduce their cyber risk and thrive in a digital world. So empower people, motivate them, and align to their success. And I think the more that we do that as an industry, the better off we are. But the more that we ignore some of these fundamental truths that we're starting to really uncover about psychology and neuroscience, the inadvertently, the more risk we may create.
Hmm. I want to hear more about this. People taking more training than they needed to. How does that even work? Like, because I would imagine typically like you have videos that you watch at an organization. That's how it worked at many organizations that I worked at, and then you would get some phishing emails here and there, and then based off of how you did, dictated how much more videos you had to watch going forward.
So, one of the most interesting psychological effects we've been on the lookout for, and we finally found some evidence in our research, is something known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. So, created by David Dunning and Justin Kruger in the 1990s, it explores this concept of the propensity of people with a little bit of knowledge to vastly overestimate their competence. And at the other end, paradoxically, people who are highly competent tend to underestimate that competence. So, they tend to be less confident. And so what's interesting is when we went back and looked at the people who answered our survey questions, and one of the questions is, have you been provided all the knowledge you need to have? And those that strongly agree, I know everything I need to know about cybersecurity, they have a 25% higher click rate average than those that are less confident. And so we've also seen that if you overtrain people, that is too much training too fast, we've actually been able to see, we went looking for a thing called diminishing returns. That is, for every incremental minute of training, were we getting X continued decline in click rate, X continued improvement in report rate, and other
Mhm.
important gains. And at 30 minutes, what we found wasn't just diminishing returns, we actually started to enter into negative returns. And so we think there's a possibility of two risks developing when you overtrain people too much too fast. Number one, you can create the Dunning-Kruger effect, so overconfidence too early for someone. Number two, we think you can really tick people off. And you hear a lot about this. People, roll their eyes at security training. People get frustrated, and we'll talk about this later. Fairness is really important. If people feel they've been unfairly put upon by their organization with training they don't think is relevant to them, or if they already feel like they know this matter, they may actually become security detractors, the exact opposite of what you want, and sort of the negative counterpart to the security champions we often hear people talk about.
That is interesting. I would say, as someone that has security at their home, like I have a Ring doorbell, it does give me a sense of false security. I have more awareness that someone might be coming up to my door, and if I feel a little more confident if somebody steals my Amazon package, that I could at least know that someone stole it rather than they didn't drop it off. But I'm not necessarily more secure, but it's like a false sense of security that I think we feel by having like locks on our door, Ring doorbells, and things like that.
Well, and it's interesting because one of the most interesting observations from our research. So we studied 170,000 people over 3 years, and we were looking for answers on our attitudes, knowledge, and behavior survey. And one of the questions we asked is, having security tools like antivirus, firewalls, or email filters completely protects me from internet threats. Now, the percentage of the population that strongly agrees with this sentiment, they have 140% higher click rate average than those who strongly disagree. So that is to say, if people think that the latest fancy AI cybersecurity tech protects them, they become far more dangerous. And so that was probably the most important aha moment this year for me. And the second aha moment about this, and it was more of a uh-oh moment, was the percentage of our population that we're giving the worst possible answer has been on the increase for the last couple of years. So there's been about a 25% year over year increase in the percentage of people who think the tech has completely got their back, which could spell
Mm.
disaster for us as organizations trying to engage and keep people from doing risky behaviors. And that's probably the thing that we need to think about the most. And one of the things that scares me right now is the current trend in security awareness is to solve the problem that's being presented to security awareness managers. The training is boring. I don't like it, by entertaining them, by creating Netflix like TV shows, by using humor appeals and other things. But are we actually creating content that will make sure that people feel like this is real, this can happen to them, and they need to be part of the solution?
How do we kind of pivot if we are in the financial institution space, like especially with efforts like this?
One of the most interesting things in the financial institution space, and I think this is the trend that has been ignored for too long, is when you look at actual cybercrime losses, ransomware gets all the attention. Ransomware is the Hollywood
It
A-lister.
does.
All want to talk about it. Ransomware was $1 billion last year in criminal money, big money. Fraud, consumer fraud in the US was $10 billion. Now, tech as the target and tech as the enabler is the story there. And the money bleeding out of banks is starting to add up. And here in Canada, we're seeing these bank investigator fraud cases start to really take off with losses in the $40,000, $50,000 range where people are being held liable. And other jurisdictions like the UK, you're seeing the rise of bank sole accountability. Well, if you provide online banking, this is your problem. Make it right. And the danger there is it's actually going to drive people to do riskier things if they think the banks just always got their back, which means the cost will be spread across all of us, just like how ransomware insurance lit the fire of the global ransomware industry. So, what's the opportunity here? We need to create shared responsibility models. We need to make sure that people actually know what they can do to protect themselves, which is a cool concept we're actually experimenting with with a really leading edge financial institution in the US, where we're
Hmm.
actually giving that same score and creating a platform approach to consumer cyber awareness and anti-fraud. So on that side of things, I think the other part is this paradox that CISOs find themselves in. And I don't have the full answer for this, but I think we have to give this deep thought. And the paradox is this: in order to get budget from your organization for security tools, you have to demonstrate ROI and you have to talk about how effective the tool is, how much it's going to reduce the risk. And vendors, in order to win your business, are going to have to talk about their success rates. And oftentimes, my greatest example of this is email filter companies. And they'll constantly talk about 99.9, some cases 99.99% fish catch rates, which is garbage. They all have a leakage rate. And right now we're seeing a leakage rate closer to 5 to 10% of fishes getting by filters. Some cases, global organizations we work with have multiple filters and fishes still get through. The problem is when the CISO makes those comments to the other executives believe them, and the CISO believes the vendor, and they communicate it to everybody else. And we create this cycle where the end employee goes, well, we've invested all this money in security tools, so clearly I'm protected. And we have to counter that messaging with, these are important tools. These are driver safety aids that without which we would be in a lot more trouble. So this is not me saying stop spending on email filters. No, that would be a very bad idea. But is to say these tools are as beautifully flawed as the people that created them. And so it's important for us to help close the gap.
Since the pandemic, I want to say like I was starting to see my phishing like emails go down, like in my personal and work email. And since the advent of ChatGPT, especially it being introduced into the mainstream, I saw like now my inbox is just broken all the time. I have sales leaders who are using the same tactics as attackers, and I think that they're actually using some of the same tools. Like the attacker tools, the attacker emails are looking a lot like sales emails. And I got this one recently from this company called Efficient Roofing, and I had just gotten a little bit of work done on my house. They just so happened to send me this email saying, hey, thank you for using Efficient Roofing. If you want to pay using financing, click this link. So out of curiosity, I looked it up. I was like, all right, is this a real website? It was. It was a very popular website that vendors use for allowing their customers to break their payments into installments. And I think nowadays there's not really much benefit if you're trying to steal money to use like a malicious website. It's just much better to use a well-known service and try to get that user to take a normal action like going to the grocery store to buy gift cards.
Yeah, so what you're seeing there, by the way, is cyber criminals are figuring out something really, really important, and this is why consumer fraud losses are 10 billion and global ransomware is 1 billion. When you roll a Colonial Pipeline, a JBS meets a United Healthcare Charge Healthcare, when you hit them for 10, 20 million dollars, you get a response now from the U.S. government called the WOG, the whole of government, which is the same as they apply to terrorism. And as they say in the famous movie Heat, that's a lot of heat. That's a lot of police attention. That's a lot of expense. But you roll grandma for less than 50,000, and maybe some field office opens up a file.
Hmm.
And so this is the application of long tail economics to crime. And with tools like AI and with crime as a service, this scales really, really well. And so that's what really kind of terrifies me is you look at the money diversion, which was $2.9 billion. So the so-called business email compromise, whaling, stealing the money, that is still phishing, by the way. And that drives me nuts about this industry is that, sometimes they're like, well, we got phishing. Well, what's phishing? Well, that's when they go after, credentials or install malware. I'm like, dudes, phishing includes stealing money. It's
Right.
using emotional manipulation to accomplish criminal aims. Stop splitting hairs on this stuff, but follow the money. So that's why it's so important. We saw an attack against us that actually had a full email thread that had conversations with me and supposedly an executive coach that had my team not been assertive, right? So we talk about cultural values. They're assertive.
Hmm.
They're open to going, why would David spend $30,000 on that's our entire annual training budget? That makes no sense. I'm going to question this. And of course, they reported it. It was completely fraud, and away we go.
Ooh, good for them. I have to jump in for a second to share some details about our sponsor for this episode, Beauceron Security. We hear about cyber in the news every single day, whether it's a massive data breach, a disruptive ransomware attack, or AI-generated bots wreaking havoc online again. It's safe to say we've never been more aware of cybersecurity risks. Yet losses from cybercrime are continuing to rise. And awareness, it's not enough. We need to motivate behavior change. Adding a high-quality security behavior and culture program to your managed service offering is the thing that's going to deliver actionable results for your clients and help you differentiate your offering in this very competitive landscape. Beauceron Security is the best trusted partner for managed service providers to deliver a comprehensive awareness and resilient solution that drives effective risk reduction. With a science-based automated approach, MSPs who leverage the Beauceron solution can automate over 75% of actions related to email triage and analysis, resulting in a significant savings of billable hours. Enhance your managed service offering with a solution that will grow your business and be part of a partnership that puts you first. Visit their website at beauceronsecurity.com/partner. Thank you, Beauceron Security, for sponsoring this episode. There's phishing emails that are simulated, and then there's phishing emails that aren't. And I have clicked on one phishing email that was simulated, and I got that little nasty, it felt like a nasty gram. It was probably not written in a malicious way, but it felt like an attack towards me. And if I were to open any other email and I don't get redirected to that portal that tells me I clicked on a phishing link, I'm not going to report it to anybody. I'm not going to report the fact that I clicked this phishing simulated link either to anyone. I feel like, hey, someone's just going to come and find me. But you were saying that there's a big gap in this space. When people click the phishing link when it's simulated, they should still report it.
Absolutely. So a couple of different things. Let's talk about the game of phishing simulations for a second. And for the most part, most people's experience is not that dissimilar to yours. It kind of sucks, because when you're playing the game, you lose. We know this. People do not enjoy this experience of losing. And the in most deployments, the best they can do is a draw. Click, don't click. Now, report is actually the most important measure of organizational resiliency. It's not click rate. Click rates are highly manipulable, but report rates are less malleable. And report rates indicate both knowledge, something about this email seemed off, but more importantly, knowledge plus attitude. I care enough to tell you about it. Now, what's really cool is, according to the Verizon data breach report, about 11% of people who click on phishing will tell their IT team. In Beauceron, in our simulations, 15% of the population go back to report. Part of that reason is the way that we've gamified that personal cyber risk score is you actually get positive points on your score when you report. Even when you fall victim, you can get the negative impact wiped out if you report it and still take your learnings. So you can actually win at the game. And that's really, really important for a fair experience. And ultimately, you want people using that report a phish button, not as the Office Space in a tech, is it good for the company moment, but as the Staples Office Depot, that was easy button to say, I don't know about this email. Right, I'm just going to report it, and I'm gonna know what's going on. So that's what we want to do.
Do people actually feel as though it's a game? Because I hear the gamification term thrown around, especially all around cybersecurity. Even people are trying to say that they can gamify the SOC, but I don't know if the SOC could ever feel like a game, because it's high stress, high stakes. But maybe there's a difference when it comes to education and training.
So when we talk about gamification, we're really talking about tapping into some of the more deeper aspects of how the brain actually works. And so when we do things that we think are going to benefit us, save us time, help us, our brain will reward us. And that happens through the release of things like dopamine. And so you want to create those moments where people can actually feel good about what they're doing. It's not about creating a video game like 3D world where you're kind of playing like an Xbox. That's not it. It's about using behavioral economics and nudge to get people to do what we want. Let me give you an explanation of that. Mm-hmm. In our first generation of our algorithm, we never imagined in our wildest dream, it's an algorithm that has a scale that goes from 500 to 1,000. With 500 being lowest risk possible, but never zero risk. We didn't think people would care about 1 to 5 point changes in those scores. And Ron, I could not have been more wrong. We made an algorithm change in 2019, and at the time we had a few 100,000 people using our platform. Now we've got 1 million plus. And the feedback was clear. So when we did our second algorithm upgrade in 2024, this year, the changes that we made to how the score works were all tied back to driving specific behaviors we knew, if people demonstrated, would tangibly reduce risk for the organization. And so to get the excellent score, so if you're a Beauceron user listening to this podcast, here is your cheat sheet. Taking your education, doing well, check. reporting all 12 monthly phishing simulations that we send. And I'll talk about why monthly simulations is the right amount. The spotting a real fish and reporting it. Yes, we have a cool AI that can actually help your team triage the non-simulations and still give people feedback about what they're reporting. That's how you turn that button into something that's valuable to them. And when they do all of those things, they get the optimum score. And we can actually see in organizations, we map this using a standard deviation bell curve kind of distribution model as our standard. And we see organizations actually shifting to the right to those excellent categories and moving along that so we can measure it. So it does work, but it has to be clear. People have to understand the rules of the game, and it needs to tap into some pretty powerful elements of neuroscience.
Love that. Okay. Okay. So you also mentioned, and I thought this was really inspiring, that people are the biggest potential for any business. And I think security has always felt like there that could be true, but people will also get in the way of security because they click on stuff. Um, Obviously, you can't ever get people to not click on things, but I guess how do you unlock the potential knowing that people are going to click regardless?
So first of all, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the stupid user fallacy, right? And my first tech job was working help desk at a university. I know what it's like to fall into this trap, where you feel like the other people are stupid. They're not. If your organization was truly full of stupid people, the biggest problem for your organization isn't cybersecurity. It's actually the fact that your organization is full of stupid people. But it's not. 99.9% of organizations, I would argue, are not full of stupid people. And when you look at smart, agile, growing organizations in the private and public sector, it is their people and culture, and people and culture eat strategy and technology for breakfast. When we talk about the mission for Beauceron, it's not just about reducing cyber risk. A cybersecurity team that's solely focused on just eliminating as much risk as possible from the business is not as impactful as one that says, how do we drive down risk while enabling potential? And that's how you get interest and excitement from strategic leaders, CEOs, and others. So by tapping into this, we've seen it. And here's some examples. When people believe that they play an important role in protecting the organization, they are 3 times more likely to report a suspicious email, which may be the last time you get a chance to shut down tens of millions of dollars flowing out of your organization in a business email compromise or a ransomware attack or more. So we've found these really interesting examples of, if people feel connected to the organization, feel like they play an important role, they click less, they report more, and we can prove it. And now you can actually measure how much of my population is in that bucket. You want to be 85 to 90% plus, and you can actually measure the incremental gains. So not only does this not have to feel hopeless, like every year we have the same click results, nothing ever changes, what are we going to do? You can actually have meaningful, measurable metrics tied back to specific psychological elements. So, one of the biggest ones that organizations need to work on, optimism bias. This isn't going to
What is
happen.
that?
So optimism bias is a natural tendency every human being has to think something bad is going to happen to someone else, not to me personally. And we all have this to varying degrees. The only time it's not really present in a human is with things like major depressive disorder. And all humans are unique. All levels of optimism bias vary among humans, but it's always there. It's important, actually. It's not just a failing. You wouldn't get out of bed if you didn't have some kind of optimism bias. But when people think my organization's not a target, 20 to 30% more likely to click on a fish. When they think they're not a target, 20 to 30% more likely to click on a fish. So actually engaging and passing on those key messages, it is real, it is relevant, it can happen to you, and using phishing simulations to prove to people, like, in a positive way, that experience with phishing simulation has taught you that yes, you can click. And that's where the value is. There's been some research this fall that's got the technical sort of cyber side all excited, phishing and training is useless. You can't change human behavior. See, we were right all along. And there are numerous problems with the broad pronouncements from that paper. The University of California, San Diego paper did us a credible service. It said things like phishing landing pages that pop up after you click don't work. No kidding. We've known that for 10 years. You actually have to follow up with meaningful interactive education afterwards to help people learn from that and use positive and negative reinforcement. But the experience of phishing in and of itself helps reset optimism bias. Now, I alluded to this earlier. One thing that's really important is that you can overfish and you can underfish.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is we discovered that monthly randomized phishing that adapts on a per person basis has the best results. Lowest average click rate, 3.05%, highest report rate. So about 25% report rate. When you fish more than monthly, the click rate actually goes up. It's about 3.5%, and the report rate is lower. It's 20%. And less than monthly, so quarterly, bi-monthly, that actually has the worst, the 5% median click rate and 15% report rate. So there's a right frequency to engage humans with the experiences to help them stay vigilant.
When we first met, maybe it might have been the last time we spoke, you were talking about a model that I never heard of called SCARF. So refresh my memory exactly what that is and how does it apply to this topic?
Yeah, so coined by Dr. David Rock, SCARF is a field that he calls neuro leadership, and it stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And, applied to the workplace, it can have a transformative impact on relationships between employees, between leaders and employees, and more. And it's fascinating. And I love how each category ties into some essential truths and some science behind it. So status. When people's status is elevated, they feel good. Their brain releases positive, happy hormones. Again, dopamine and others. When they lose status, it can trigger the same areas of the brain as physical pain. So people will orient towards status, and it's a powerful thing. Certainty. Our brains are these amazing, constant analytical predictive engines. The neocortex in particular is constantly running scenarios. Am I going to die? Is this going to benefit me? It hates uncertainty because uncertainty ramps up its actual energy consumption. It's a CPU hog. And so the more you can introduce certainty, the more you reduce stress. When we're uncertain, the amygdala becomes more active, cortisol is released. So what we've done with Beauceron, with the score, is we tapped into status. I have a score, it's measured, I can see it. We've tapped into certainty. I know how the score works and how my demonstration of knowledge and behavior and the work I do will actually translate. Now, autonomy is a fascinating one. So when people feel like they have more autonomy, the prefrontal cortex of the brain actually lights up more and the quality of the decisions they make increases. So how in security awareness programs do we not just serve people the mandatory training, the fish sticks, but also give people a chance to learn things on their own, to self-select into things that interest them that can increase that autonomy? So that's important. Now, relatedness is really important. When we feel connected to others, as I mentioned before, when people feel like they're part of protecting the organization, 3 times more likely to report, less likely to click. That's amazing. But also as humans, oxytocin is released. That's the bonding hormone. We're more likely to listen to people that we can relate to. And that's an important lesson for security awareness and IT teams. If you're just the department of no, if you're the department of making my life harder, they don't relate to you. And you're not going to get people to trust you and do what you need them to do. So how do we tap into that relatedness and make sure? And the last one is fairness. And fairness is one I'm personally attuned to quite a bit. Human beings will do incredible things when they think they're being unfairly treated by their organization. There's a whole theory around in HR called equity theory about, people, maybe they take office supplies, maybe they come in late, leave early, maybe they steal money for the organization in extreme cases. But fairness is important. Running fundamentally unfair phishing simulation programs is a disservice and people will feel hard done by. So make sure that instead of having the wall of shame, and I've actually seen organizations have this, like, here's all the people that click, name and shame. No, Wall of Fame. Here are the people that caught and reported all 12 simulations we sent this year. And in fact, one of our national telecommunications customers, they created a President's Club for cybersecurity awareness. So they got a
Oh,
certificate from the head of their organization celebrating how well they had done, aligning their attitudes, knowledge, and behaviors to the security culture that the organization wanted to have. That's how you tap into fairness. And you can see that. So all the work that we're doing, we're mapping back to this. And we're also mapping back to other established frameworks because we don't need to reinvent the wheel in cybersecurity. We need to use proven science and build on those and advance the whole state of motivating people to make good choices.
with that President's Club, was there any money or trips, incentives?
So interestingly enough, one of the things that I've noticed is intrinsic motivators. A simple thank you, a job well done, and
Mhm.
acknowledgement like this. Again, tying back to that status, that moves people far more than extrinsic motivators do. But you can have the best of both worlds. And actually, a very smart lady, Dr. Shayla Treadwell, she was one of the first PhDs in organizational psychology with a cybersecurity background, and someone I think just the world of. We once had a really good conversation about, okay, when do we use gift cards and other extrinsic motivators? And Shayla suggested that if you have a random draw process, not only can you control your budget for that, because what happens if all of a sudden everyone does the amazing thing and you're now negative $10,000 in your security awareness budget? You can actually have a fixed budget, a random draw to where you go, and people are more excited about a random chance to win something, tapping again into psychology. Otherwise, it
Hmm.
becomes an entitlement and an expectation. So you can do both. Not all humans are intrinsically motivated. And if you're in the sales team, God love you. You are very extrinsically money motivated. And I, for one, I appreciate every salesperson out there, even the hardworking ones that are just bombarding my inbox. I know what you're trying to do for your organization and keep it up. So you can balance those motivators.
One last topic I wanted to jump into was emotional intelligence. You were saying on our previous call that emotional intelligence is one of those driving factors that is going to like outshine the best technology, including artificial intelligence. But I gotta say, it doesn't always feel like the people in security that are running these programs have the highest level of emotional intelligence.
Well, and again, let's look at the evolution of this field, right? The IT team is drowning in security incidents circa the mid 2000s. Awareness becomes, there's some phishing tools here, corner of your desk, go get this done. Here's some security awareness, get this done. It was always get this done. And it was always done by people who were never given the time, skill sets, or other areas. And we're only a nascent industry in terms of these skills now being professionalized. But yes, emotional intelligence is critical. Research from the United States has shown that emotional intelligence training can reduce the propensity to click again by 50%. Toronto Metropolitan University in Canada did a similar experiment, also replicated those results. We did an experiment where we had 8,000 people take a course called A Mindful Approach to Phishing, where we taught mindfulness and emotional intelligence. That
Hmm.
cohort had a 50% reduction in their click rate. So we've the beautiful thing about science is that when you can replicate something, the more you can replicate it, the more you can see there's something here, there's smoke here. And so I think emotional intelligence is the best counter to AI because AI templates look really good. They're timely. They've got the right kind of attack to the right person at the right time. And
Mhm.
so, what your best defense is thinking about why, thinking critical, and how is this trying to make me feel about this?
A lot of small and medium businesses, they have a lot smaller budgets, including my company as well. You're running your own business, you have to pay your people, you have to innovate and build technology, do the amazing research that you're doing. How does this fit into smaller companies with smaller budgets?
So first of all, the solutions in our space typically are quite affordable. So they're far more affordable than people think, particularly when they often think cybersecurity, they're thinking about, six-figure spends and other things. So there are some things. But even if you don't have that sort of 4 or 5 figure budget to spend on security awareness, which I would argue is really good ROI, set that aside. There are still things you can do. Sit down with your company once a quarter and talk about why cybersecurity matters to your organization. Fun fact, it doesn't matter if people agree with management or strongly disagree that management cares about security. The fact they know where management stands and they're talking about it actually drives your risk lower. So talk about it 4 times a year. Talk about what's happened. Show real examples of it. You probably do communicate with people. There are things you can do right now that will tangibly start reducing the risk. The work that we do is about optimizing it, getting it to as low as possible for as few minutes of staff time as possible to optimize that return on investment. But you can start somewhere. Don't let inertia be the thing that sets you up for a catastrophe.
For sure. And you're right. I think you just have to figure out what is the cost going to be. I think that there's always an opportunity to do something, whether it's hiring somebody, investing in a great technology and team like yours, or you're just approaching the problem with a different mindset as well. But I think it would only be right as well, since you all were kind enough to sponsor this live stream and podcast episode. I wanted to say thank you from the bottom of our heart at Hacker Valley Media, but also wanted to give you an opportunity to tell the audience why they should consider partnering with Beauceron Security.
So for organizations that actually offer security awareness to their customers, we have an automated platform that's designed with a science-based background to drive those results your customers are desperate for quickly and efficiently and effectively. And we can help you save cost. We're helping one MSP. They're actually losing money right now on a per customer employee headcount with all the fishes that are being reported by those employees. They're just drowning in fishes. And our automation tool is actually helping them triage that. And so there are a variety of approaches that we have that are unique in the market to help MSPs, managed security providers, and more do that. Now, if you're looking as an end customer to do security awareness, we drive risk reduction faster and better than any other platform on the planet. And number of times, folks have copied what Beauceron has done. We were the first to do fully automated randomized phishing, and we're the first to do adaptive difficulty fair phishing. So there's a lot of innovation coming out of a small and mighty company like Beauceron. And that's the difference we make, is that we genuinely are pushing the state and science of this to actually drive the results. We're not just trying to check the box, and we're not just going to sell you something we don't believe in.
I'm really excited for what y'all are building at Beauceron Security. I'm excited to have the opportunity to speak to you, but maybe have you on the podcast again sometime in the future. David, I wanted to say thank you again for taking us out of your busy day. So with that, we will see everyone next time.